coming up next, we have Alex Grossman, and he's going to talk about something that we all deal with. With the drop in camera prices and the proliferation of data, we are just making more and more and more data. Alex is going to tell us how to store all that. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Chris. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Alex Grossman. I'm the VP of Media Entertainment for Quantum. Some of you probably know Quantum, maybe not. But Quantum is the only 100% XAN compatible shared storage solution. So we do collaborative storage, what we like to call end-to-end, all the way from ingest to archive, including delivery and work in process. And we do this for companies that are small, from 1 or 2 users in a post facility all the way up to a lot of the major studios and most of the broadcast environments. But today, I want to take a little bit of time to talk to you about 4K. And I'll use the gratuitous 4K logo that is one of the 50,000 that are out there. But we made sure that we caught 4K and Ultra HD and did it in low quality for you, okay? Just because, why not? 4K means a lot of things to a lot of people. And to me, it's always like, I ask people, what is 4K to you? And I get a lot of different answers, you know? The first answer I always get is that, 4K is difficult. Some people say that to me. Other people say, 4K is easy. I get that. Some people go, it's unknown. I don't know what to do with it. I'm not really sure. And most people just say it's a fad, it's hype. I don't think it's a fad, to be honest with you. And it has been hype for a lot of people. I mean, think about this. 3D, was that real or was that a fad? How many people invested in 3D? Oh, sorry, okay. Oh, it was a fad. But there were a lot of people that invested, exactly. And I went to, I spent a little bit of time in Asia about a year and a half ago. And they, believe it or not, I can't say the company, but the company said, this is a great way to look at 3D. 3D is enhanced reality. 8K is reality. And after looking at it, I agree. So when I talk about 4K, I'm really talking about high resolution, and 4K is just a start, because we're not stopping, unfortunately. Or fortunately, I'm a storage company. We're not stopping, fortunately. It's a really good thing. Now, everybody here knows Renee Hansen, probably, and Renee said to me the other day, 4K is just some other resolution. Actually, it was in January. Said to me, it's just some other resolution, unless we add HDR. Then it's a whole new ballgame. So the way to look at it to me is that it's really none of these things. 4K is an opportunity, because it's content, and content in high resolution is valuable. And the more value we have in content, the more we can remonetize the content, the more we can get our message across, the better we can do. But the other question everyone asks is, and how many have you worked with 4K? Quite a bit? Ah, one person, cool. On that laptop? Okay, but kind of, right? It's just a resolution, unless. But the key really is, can I work in 4K the way I work in HD today? That's really the question. So can I take that same pipeline, that same workflow, and just work with it? I think the answer is, kind of it depends. So I want to drive through a couple things. They're not really technical, but I want to drive through some of the things we see with 4K. So the first thing to understand about 4K is that it means so many things to different people because people really don't know what it is. It's really codec dependent. Is it ProRes? Is it RAW? What are you shooting with? What's your input device? I mean, this is really the problem that we have with 4K. So I hear, again, some of my customers say, well, we do everything exclusively 4K. We've got 30 GoPros, okay? They might as well say to me, we do everything in 4K. We put it all up on YouTube, okay? And anybody play with YouTube 4K? It's kind of interesting. Works occasionally. It's pretty good. And anybody have Netflix 4K? 4K? Oh, who has a 4K TV? Oh, come on, people. I'm the only one. I got 2 of them. It's pretty sad. Okay. I knew someone was buying them. But I'm maybe not ahead of the curve, though. I mean, if you think about this, Walmart announced, I think last month, that by Christmas they won't be selling any HD TVs. They're all going to be Ultra HD. And if you think about that, part of that's driven by Vizio, who lowered the price of Ultra HD 55 inches to $9.95. And so you get that nice Walmart price and that Costco price of like $8.95 for a 55-inch, kind of 4K, almost 4K Ultra HD TV. So it's really, something's happening out there. And the demand, they're saying now it's about a 20% penetration of 4K TVs in the US, which is huge. The demand for 4K is there. So here's the depends part of this. Can you do 4K at what level, what quality? Can you do it Can you be shooting the new House of Cards? Possibly. Could you be putting it on YouTube? If you have Renee has a Samsung, I think S4, S5 camera, whatever it is there. It has 4K. So I guess, yes, you can do it today. But is it real 4K? What's the value of that content? Value of the content in real 4K is a little different. The other interesting thing about it is the penetration of 4K and how it's come along is really interesting. So when we did the transition, so those of us are old, we remember the transition from, well, actually I remember the transition from, linear editing, but the transition from SD to HD, anybody have an idea how long that took us? 14 years, okay? And think about this. So you go from SD to HD. What were we doing in SD? Well, we were tape in, tape out for the most part. We called it nonlinear editing, but it wasn't all file-based. I mean, it was still tape in, tape out. And it was really easy because we had a tape, we took the tape out of the camera, we acquired the tape. We didn't acquire it in those days. We captured the tape. We took the raw tape. We wrote something on it. This was our MAM, our Media Asset Manager. We grabbed our Sharpie and we wrote on it, here it is, and we stuck it on the shelf. That was our raw. And then somewhere along the line, however we did this, we delivered it. And we delivered it on tape, and we always made two. We took one, we wrote on a Sharpie, we took a rubber band, we rubber banded them together so we knew we had raw and finished, and then we delivered the finished tape. It was pretty easy. That was SD, it was great. But then along came HD, and for the most part, yeah, we had certain tapes, I won't mention kinds. We had tapes that would do HD, but now we went from this much to this much on a single tape, and now instead of having one tape on the shelf, we had 15, and someone said, hey, this isn't gonna work, let's look at digital. You guys know what I'm talking about, right? Let's look at digital acquisition. So here comes digital acquisition, and it seemed really easy because we had all this SD equipment. And for the most part, it didn't work. It broke. Everybody broke. And at that time, I was with a storage company. We were developing storage arrays because you had to have arrays now, more than one disk. And they were really high-quality RAID 0 because that's what you needed to do HD, which meant that if a disk failed, you lost everything. And here was the best part about it. In the early days of HD, if a disk failed and you lost everything, you probably acquired it digitally somewhere. And of course, you had no backup because it was probably something like a P2 card. And as soon as you were done with that P2 card, it went back out in the field. And so you just hope that it wasn't, that last person's ever performance. And if it was, well, you're probably like doing this at the Riviera right now, sweeping it away as it's going away. And there's a lot of people I know who do that. But the interesting thing about that is you really look at this and you say, well, digital in, digital out, that's where we got to in HD. But think of where it started. It was one stream. It was one camera. This is where we were. So we had 14 years to get to, multiple camera angles, multiple camera shots, a ton of effects, color correction, a lot of things that we didn't do really digitally in HD. But now we're asking this transition to go from HD, where we know exactly what to do. After 14 years, we pretty much got it down. It's kind of like driving, right? That first week, you're a little scared, smack the bumper, maybe hit your neighbor's car, whatever you do. But after 14 years of driving, you're still smacking the neighbor's car, but you don't care anymore, right? That's where we are with HD. Now we're saying, let's go to high resolution, and let's do all those things we've learned to do over 14 years, all these great things that we have, and let's just roll that over, and most people think the transition is going to take 2 years. And I think within 18 months from today, or actually from this NAB, the end of this NAB, you will see in the US a significant portion. I mean, we're probably going to tip the scales of how many people are shooting in 4K. Not delivering in 4K yet. That's 5 years probably. But we're already seeing this, and I'm seeing this way more than I ever thought I would. People putting in contracts, RFPs, requests for proposals on jobs, especially to post facilities, saying you have to have the ability to finish in 4K, or you're not getting the job. That means people are having to invest money. Bless you. And 4K is not always so easy. So let's go back to the depends, okay? So here's the depends, first one. And I'm using a few, oh, that picture looks great. I'm using a few generic things here, right? That's your typical older Mac and your typical generic RAID. Do you like that? It's a bunch of bricks. People always call them bricks. Your generic RAID. If you have this, how many people believe that you're ready to do 4K at any resolution except for YouTube resolution? No, that's not going to work. But if you have one of these today, how many people think that's going to work? Okay, it depends. It depends on those little bricks that are on the bottom. It depends on what connection those bricks have. It depends on which one of those cylinders you bought, right? And it depends on what resolution you're using. But for the most part, there's a great tool there to do that as a single user. And as a single user doing 4K, we feel pretty good about it. All our tools are available, everything is available, and we can do that. The question really is that the way we can become efficient and we can compete in the world as a single user doing 4K? That's going to be the big question, because now we're expected to be able to come in with more ins, have more outs, and do things in the same amount of time. And the amount of content people are asking for is increasing every day. How many of you are involved in over-the-top stuff? OTT, right? We used to call it second screen last year, or what do we call it next year? Any guesses? Anybody wanna? I always like to write these down on a piece of paper, put them away, go, what are we going to call it next year? I'll give you a quick one here. When we went from gigabytes to terabytes, we called it gigabytes to terabytes. Well, we never really went to petabytes. We haven't gone to gigabytes yet, but we haven't gone really to petabytes and everything, but we like to call things petascale. It's not petabyte scaling, it's petascale. So we're going to make up some more really cool names as we go forward, so just watch out for those. So today, though, the petascale archives and petascale pieces are involved when you get to 4K. So how about this one? This is one of my favorite things in the world. This is called a typical XAN network. I'm really familiar with some of these products. These were called Xserves. Those are called Xserve raids. Most people used to call them X-raids in the old days for some strange reason. And this is what your typical environment looked like. Oh, well, I think most people would say from 2005 probably until 2011, 2010. This is what people did. This is what you built. You built these. And FCPWORKS Implemente built many of these. And the question really is, can you do 4K on this as it stands today? Absolutely not. I mean, even fiber channel networks today probably can't do that. So the question you have to ask yourself is, have you upgraded because things got easier in HD and moved from fiber channel networks to Ethernet networks? Well, if you did, you probably can squeeze out some HD, but guess what? Can you do 4K? I'm going to tell you it's probably a bad move if you're going to move to 4K. So when you get that RFP in your desk and someone says, can you do this in 4K? You say, move to the next place, and then you go from a building this big to a building this big. So there's investments to be made. But this technology isn't really there. I'm going to show you a shared environment, which is a typical high-resolution environment that we see, the minimal that we see people investing in today. And it's a little more complex. Oh, before I do that, I want to talk about this. I screwed myself up there. Why are we looking at this? Why? So the reason we're looking at this is that video content has become 100% digital. The other thing is teams now are kind of global. So I always look at this and I go, well, I live in LA and I go to New York a lot. And if I'm in LA and New York and I want to get a shooter, or I want to get a DP, I want to get anybody, it's pretty easy. I make a phone call, I find them. What if I'm not there? What if I'm shooting on location? What if I have someone who's really good and they decided they're going to move to Atlanta, Georgia? How do I get them to come and help me? Big problem. How do I do that when I'm pushing 4K files across the wire? Can we just push them across that cloud thing? Not so easily. So Monica shot some 4K video recently, and she said, hey, I'll send it to you. And so it was like, what was it, like 95 gigs? Yeah, that wasn't going to work over the internet. It just didn't happen. So she gave me a hard drive, which, you know, SneakerNet, here we are in 2015, SneakerNet. Might have been a floppy drive, you know, if anybody knows what those are, anybody old enough? So globally distributed teams, it's not going to work in the future to be able to take hard drives and just ship them around. People are doing that today on 4K. They're even taking tape, like LTO tape, and writing out to and shipping around. What's the problem with that, though? Problem is, again, you got to make 2 copies because that hard drive, it can be damaged. Everybody see how FedEx treats property? Speed, cost. Today, though, compared to shipping across the wire, for the most part, what's the fastest WAN accelerator there is? It's called a FedEx truck, right? That's just the bottom line. But this has to get fixed. And it was in HD, it was kind of almost possible. But ask how they did the Olympics in 4K and how they sent things around. Really some interesting things. They took 4 individual WAN acceleration technologies and sent everything across with 4 because they couldn't trust that one would be able to do it. So we're not quite there with 4K. File sizes and resolutions are increasing. That's the duh. And we all know that. More ingest formats. You know, my buddy who shoots GoPro cameras, he also shoots with an F65. So, you know, there's a little bit of difference there. That's like Rolls-Royce, Prius, I'm not sure. More transcode and render steps. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. Greater number of delivery formats. Okay, the over-the-top thing is just exploded. I mean, you know, I carry an iPhone. Some people carry other things, unfortunately. iPads, you know, we're talking about computers. HD TV, SD TV, still, believe it or not, it's out there in some countries. There's so much going on, and everybody has a different one. I just recently talked to one of my customers last night, and he was saying to me, well, we're really a content owner, and we want to make sure that the content is represented the best way. And so what we do is we don't trust anybody to transcode our content. So we basically do 163 different formats going out of our company. 163 different formats. And I'll tell you, they distribute to companies like Apple and Netflix and Hulu, and that's just 3 that I could think of. They have 163 different formats. So when you're doing that, that's pretty hard. It's not easy to do because it takes time. You just don't go, ooh, look, I'm a magic render tool. So things are changing there too. The other thing is topologies and interconnects have evolved. So at one time, I would never consider even putting a review station out on Ethernet, nor would I ever use what I call Starbucks Internet for someone to review dailies. But today I might, because I can transcode that down to something really small, send some proxy out, and be able to do that. But I have to make sure that I send that same proxy as the mezzanine format I'm running, and no way am I doing 4K RAW. So it just leads to increased complexity throughout. You know, if you're a single editor or you're running a facility, the complexity is much, much greater. So back to my other piece here, which is this. This is a production workflow we see today. So really kind of simple, you know, ingest an editorial. You basically have an asset manager, everything gets logged in. Today, if we want to remonetize, I mean, people say to me, well, I'm still not using asset manager. I still have the Sharpie, or, you know, maybe I'm using some type of database to manage things. But I don't really know if I need an asset manager. I don't do that much work. Well, the bottom line is it's not for the work you do today. It's the remonetization and the value of your content that you need to maintain. And also in the production workflow, the production asset managers allow you to pull a lot of pieces together, especially when they're from other sources. And so today, most people run through an asset manager for a lot of reasons, and I'll explain a couple others in a minute. Then you have your work in process volume. We usually call it the SAN. It's not always the SAN, but it's a work in process volume. And you have various format conversions on archive and delivery. And for the most part, most people really haven't thought about archive. In HD, they thought about archive a little. How many have a lot of, you know, drives, brand X, brand Y drives just hanging around, right? On your shelf, for me, in the closet, stacked up. Can I do my dirty little secret here? I'm going to go back in my hard drive days. Dirty little secret on hard drives are, when you put them in the shelf, you put them in the closet, they have a life. So how many people believe this? You can believe it or not. Hard drives have a fixed life. It's 3 to 5 years. It doesn't matter if you use it every day or if you don't touch it for 5 years. The drive has a fixed life. It dies. Drives, for a lot of reasons, will die. They're magnetic material. The magnetic material loses its coherence, and those ones turn to zeros really quick. And so if you leave things on the shelf, in fact, if you don't use them, they die faster. And that's because when you turn them on and you run them, you have 2 things. One is you kind of lubricate the drive a little bit, and you blow the dust off the top of it, and you go, well, my drive's sealed. Okay, drives are not sealed. Sorry, fallacy, everything, drives are not sealed. They vent. So the dust ends up on the platters. The dust is 4 times as tall as the head off the platter, which is basically about 1/3 the thickness of a human hair, depending on your hair. Mine's pretty thin, about the size of my hair. My buddy Skip over here, he's got thick hair. It's probably 10 times thicker than the distance. But dirt is pretty tall. So if you let that thing sit on a shelf, 3 things happen. 1, dust collects on there, and I'll tell you why that's bad. Second thing that happens is moisture collects in there. I don't have to tell you why that's bad, right? Especially with minerals in the air, but I'll tell you. Third thing that happens is the magnetic material on the drive starts to lose coherence. The drives tend to erase themselves. So the reason dust is bad is because the head sits in a parking area, the drive spins up, and the head flies out. The head has little wings, and it flies 1/3 the thickness of a human hair over the disk. If there's a mountain in the way, called the particle of dust, that's a bad thing. Take your car, drive it into a mountain, bad thing. It's exactly the same thing. So you could possibly damage the disk. If you have moisture in the disk because it's been sitting around, if you're like me, you live in Southern California, I live 2 miles from the beach, I get a little bit of humidity. It's damp, it's cold, and there's this thing called salt in the air. and that salt goes in and out of my hard drive and lands on the platter. And you know, salt kind of looks, or minerals, kind of look like little mountains on the platter that the heads have to fly over. They don't like to do that. They don't like to read. Third thing is this magnetic coherence and the cohesion of the magnet. If you don't turn the drive on and run it, basically it will go away. But if you actually use it every day, now I'm not even talking about the bearings and the grease and all the other stuff that can happen with things, but if you turn it on every day and you run it, two things happen. One is if you have a Mac, the good news is every time you start it up, the file system goes out and it does a little thing called a FISC, or a file system consistency checkout on the disk. So it actually finds bad areas when it can, and it rewrites them down. So you don't have to worry about the magnetism going away. So that's a good thing. Now you do wear the disk out because what you're doing is you're moving the heads around, it's spinning, and the bearings are there. But those bearings are made to last 20 years, and those heads, the actuators there, will go 20 years. I wouldn't worry about that too much. But the media itself in the drive is going to fail long before that. So turning them on is good. The problem with turning your drives on is if you don't bring them up to temperature, guess what you do? You cause humidity and other problems to happen in the drives. The other problem is if you run them and you turn them off, every time you do that, you have to put a lot of current to the drive to spin it back up every day, and the electronics will fail. So you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't, and just imagine 3 to 5 years. So that means that all that great stuff you shot 20 years ago that's on drives that you're going to go plug in now, you're going to have 3 problems. 1, will the drive come up? 2, does the operating system even recognize that drive anymore? And 3, can you even find the drive if your Sharpie has worn off a little bit? That's one of the problems. So long-term archive in a SD world was pretty easy. We had it on tape. In an HD world, we kind of got away with bad practices because we could just buy more online storage, and we just kept it and we turned it on. And we tend to call this ad hoc growth. And it was great for storage companies. We just sold more and more and more and more. And in those days, early days, if you're a single user, couple people, it was kind of unmanageable. You got around it in your head. You didn't really have a media asset manager, but you named things somewhat correctly. If you didn't do too many jobs, you could figure it out. You know, you knew what the project was, the customer, whatever. You spent a few hours finding stuff, and most of it was there, and most of it was good. Sometimes you open the file, and you got a bunch of pink and green squares up there instead of the actual file, and you thought, and you said, maybe I should have backed that up. And backing it up wasn't always a good idea, because where's the backup window? It took so long to put it out on tape. So we got into bad habits of ad hoc growth, and we had a lot of disk. And if we could manage it, we did. The problem is, when we're talking about 4K and we're talking about HDR, we're not just talking about twice as big. We're not talking about 4 times as big. We're talking about somewhere between 7 and 8 times as big, depending on the formats. That's a lot of storage. It gets a little more complex. It takes a lot longer to write it. It takes a lot longer to read it. It takes a lot longer to manage it. And people are asking for it in a lot of formats. And what do you save? So you save the raw, of course, right? You save the finish. You conform and you save that. But a lot of times, you know, you don't, if you have a rendering process and you're doing it on a single system, it takes a long time to re-render out. So you want to save that as well. So how do you do that? Is the price of all this storage getting cheaper? Maybe. There's a few ways, but it's really not. Because usually, you know, there's 3 things you can have. You can have good, fast, and cheap. Pick any of those 2. And that's usually the problem. So this is what it usually looks like. People use digital delivery today. You know, they use Aspera. My favorite is 4K on YouTube. But they use Aspera. They use Signiant. There's many other deliveries. I will say today, most people still deliver on hard drive. That's where I see it mostly. That quote-unquote FTP site delivering 4K. Yeah, I don't grow hair very well. I could grow a beard by the time that I delivered, you know, small project in 4K. And today we have to think way more about archive. And believe it or not, the #1 archive has been around for about 57 years, which is tape. And the reason is tape is fast. It's not fast, but it's cheap and it's reliable. But it's getting a little small for 4K. So, you know, even if you think about the enterprise tapes, as they call them, you know, you can do 10 terabytes on a tape compressed, but somewhere around 4.5 uncompressed. An LTO tape, you're going to get a little under 2 terabytes in most cases. Really not good. There's a lot of technologies around tape like LTFS. That's a standard. That's not really standard. You know, the thing I love about standards, there's so many. Pick one. It'll change. And so production workflows tend to look like this. But in the real world, that's what we really see. So in the last year, we've deployed a lot of these. And we've deployed these in, I would say, facilities that are pretty darn small. I mean, I've deployed these in facilities with 6 people and deployed these on studio backlots, at broadcasters, everywhere. So let me run them through really quickly. Notice I put my GoPro up there, and Red and Sony. This is what people use. And people have XSAN clients. I mean, I love XSAN. People run on Macs, but guess what? There's always a Windows client in there. It's going to be one, maybe even Linux. And some of those clients, you know, they're doing specialized purposes in 4K. So color correction in 4K. You know, you can have DaVinci, you can do a lot of different things, but there's sometimes a Windows client in there. The other problem is ingest has become its own thing because you don't want to slow down everything you do with the ingest. And for the most part, the ingest is going to be on its own server today. We're seeing that quite a bit. Could be a dedicated workstation. But you know, you have to run from ingest down through your fiber channel switch. You're still usually ingesting at very high speed, so fiber channel is still the best way to do it in 4K. Go down to your main storage. This is what we call our MDC. This is actually the brains. Call this a traffic cop, same as the Xserves were in an XSAN. We need these so that all these users can touch all the data without crunching on top of each other. Worst thing in the world when someone writes over your stuff, bad day. Or someone erases it by mistake. So this gives us control, and these are part of what basically every workflow is. If you're using a scale-out NAS, this is part of the NAS computer. If you're using, like we do here, this is SAN and NAS combined, and I'll explain that in a minute. And then, of course, there's storage, and the storage grows. And so then once you're in and out from your ingest server, the first thing that you're going to do is you're going to transcode, because you probably want to get that raw to a mezzanine format and a proxy format. And so what I did here is I threw something in here, a technology called object storage. And object storage is just, think of it as a big, less expensive, way more durable RAID. That's the way to look at it. You could do this all on a single RAID, but for the most part, what I'm calling this is an ingest volume. That ingest volume, you go copy your content right over to the ingest volume. Usually you don't even land it on your work and process server. You put it on your ingest volume. You transcode it to many different transcodes. You throw it back on your ingest volume. Then you push it from your ingest volume to your work and process volume. At the same time, you're going to throw it from your ingest volume to your archive because, especially with 4K, if you lose it, it's pretty bad. Same time, what you're going to do is you're going to use your delivery server to be able to push it out to your preview clients, maybe your dailies, people who need to see it, production managers, and then eventually you're going to deliver digitally. That is pretty complex. And can you do that in a single computer today? No way. No way. And it's very difficult for anybody in the future with 4K to be able to deliver the way we did as an independent any longer. It's just not going to happen. So there's a lot of complexity in this. We've done a bunch of things at Quantum to reduce the complexity, but here's what you have to deal with. So you deal with things like this. This is a dashboard that we have because we need to see performance and complexity. We've always had these problems, right? The hard drive's too slow. I'm dropping frames. My Ethernet is too slow. I'm dropping frames. I need a new fiber channel switch. I'm dropping frames. It's coming off of tape too slow. I can't edit it right now. I can't mount the tape. All these issues we've had. I need to copy it from one disk to the other. It's too slow. So we did things that we call performance profiling. In fact, this is kind of what this product looks like. This is StorNext Connect. It's really simple. I figured this way you'd be more bored talking to me than watching this. And this gives you a way to be able to discover all the components in your network, be able to manage them, be able to look at everything that's out there, get your performance characteristics, drill into where you are. You say to yourself, well, why would I need this? Well, you need this because 4K is hard to do. It really is hard to do. And you're going to convert it, you're going to output it and save it. It's really a great product to be able to do that. And I don't know how you do 4K without having an idea of what's going on. So, you know, the good old days, we had these XSAN gurus. A lot of them work at Implementing today. Renee Hansen's one of them. You have these XSAN gurus that just know how to do XSAN. They understand it. They get it. You know, they can optimize. They bring out their optimization programs. They figure it out. They do it. And they were good at it. The problem is the complexity was like that first drawing that I showed you. Today's complexity, where is the problem? How do you find it? It's troubleshooting. It's really great, crazy. And the problem is Things don't always last like that. So when you have that level of complexity, any day, anything can break and stop you from delivering. So you have to stay on top of everything you do. So it's hard. So that's just a few things. Let's just kind of talk about this. Considerations. So what do you have to consider in 4K? Ingest content size. How do I get it in? What do I do when it's coming in? How do I work as I ingest? Asset protection. Well, your assets, your finished content, if you're a content owner, you're going to want to protect it. This is a real consideration. It can no longer sit in the sand. I also didn't mention this, and I should. RAID is good. It's great protection. But RAID isn't everything. The longer things sit out on RAID, the more risk you have. Today, hard drives are big. How big are hard drives today? 6 terabytes. Soon we'll have 8 terabytes. Very soon we'll have 10 terabytes. Anybody rebuild the 10 terabyte drive? Okay, it can take a week. Okay, if you're exposed with a 10 terabyte drive, well, that could be a problem. Drives tend to fail. I don't know how much you guys know about hard drives. Drives tend to fail very infrequently when they're new, but as they get older and as we strain them, and just so you know, doing 4K video is like having a hard drive run a marathon all day long. And then when you go to render it out, it's like running 2 marathons, especially if you're editing while you're rendering. So hard drives' lives shrink. They're usually close to that 3-year, that 5-year. None of us want to go buy new hard drives right away. We want to get the maximum time we can. So the first thing we go to do when our hard drive is old is we copy it to another hard drive. So we've run our hard drive what we call duty cycle, 100% all day long. Now we copy to another one. We're asking it to do 200%. And what happens at a hard drive? Usually it fails prematurely. But usually if it's in an array of hard drives, you're safe because you're protected, right? That's a safe thing. See you guys nod. Protection, RAID 5, RAID 6. The problem is when hard drives get old and one dies, they like to die together. So it's what we call cascading drive failure. So you start seeing that. So protection on RAID for long-term archive of big content like 4K is not safe. So we have to think about codecs, we have to think about quality, we have to think about the future. So while we may be able to use a codec that has slightly lower quality, we go, it looks good today, it's probably not going to look in the future. We want to finish in 1080, we also probably want to finish in 4K, or at least have RAW and EDLs and all the pieces we need to finish in 4K. Most people do effects in 2K, they're not delivering in 4K. The other thing you have to worry about in 4K is delivery, and more importantly, efficiency. I think today, with a lot of the tools that I've used over the last 2 years, I can effectively do a 4K workflow on the cheap. The problem is I can't do it on the cheap and do it fast. And so if you're going to get a job and someone else is going to get a job, they're probably going to win if they have the efficiency. And then technologies continue to change. People probably saw this. SEMPTE did a thing a few months ago where they took, I think, 50 people, not in the industry, just normal people. Nobody here is normal, sorry. They took normal people and they said, look at this image and look at this image and tell me which one's higher resolution, which one you like. And they looked at them and they said, the one on the right. I think it was like 90% of the time, they said the one on the right. The one on the right was 1080p with HDR. It wasn't 4K. So people said, that's not a good thing. So then they did that test again, and they took HDR and 4K, and they took that against regular HDR, and they picked that 4K and HDR. And someone brilliant said, we need to have HDR in every TV. And so today, HDR is built in the TV, built in the content, and it takes about twice as much storage. So get ready for that one. That's just one of the technologies that's coming. So I want to talk to you about one other thing, not 100% related to 4K, but things that we have to think about. And that's something that we're doing at the show, and you should think about this. How many people have thought about the cloud? You look up, right? Here's the cloud. But this is a hot thing, and the only reason I mentioned it. So the cloud is something everybody always talks to me about. They go, hey, I don't need to buy any more storage. I'll just put it all up in the cloud. Okay? Well, we made the cloud really easy. We introduced something called QCloud Archive. Just works in StorNext. If you upgrade an Extant environment, it'll work. But the problem with the cloud is that the cloud is big and it's scalable, but guess what? It's slow. And so the cloud is great for certain things. If you have a lot of time to archive, it's a pay-as-you-go model. At least from us, it's a pay-as-you-go model. It can be very inexpensive as long as you don't keep too much up there. but the cloud isn't for everybody. But you should check it out as you walk around NAB, look at the cloud, and see where it goes. The other thing that I wanted to talk to you about was just StoreNext 5. StoreNext 5 is it's 100% compatible with Xsan. It's our technology that takes you to the future, and it's what QCloud is based on. And what we do is we take complex workflows, we make them really easy to go to public cloud. You know, you've heard of those public clouds like Amazon, and they're really easy. But you should consider this because people are going to tell you the cloud is everything, it's perfect, don't worry, just when you go to 4K, just go to the cloud. If that can happen, come back and see me and tell me how you did it, because I'd really love to know. For me, that's about it on 4K. Any questions? We're good? Yes, sir.
You touched on the RAID and the possible, inadequacies of that as a backup.
Where would you go? So, two fallacies in the world. One is that I'm going to take my RAID, I'm going to shut it off and stick it in the corner, just like with the hard drive, and then eventually when I need it, I'll get it back. Okay? RAID's made of hard drives. Hard drives fail, RAID fails. So you don't want to ever turn it off. You want to keep it running. But you still have to look at that 3 to 5 years. So you go, that's not good. What do I do? Here's your 3 choices you have today. Choice 1, tape backup. Tape is still the least expensive. It's slow. It's cheap. It's slow. It's cheap. Those 2 things good about it, okay? Tape is still a great way. The rule of any archive is 3 copies. No one ever follows that. At least give me 2. Keep 1 on site, take 1 off site. Tape is great for that. Small facilities, you take 1 home, you leave 1 in the facility, right? Depending on who your customers are and if they let you do that. Big facilities, you pay a service to hold them. Tape is still the most inexpensive, cheapest way to do it. The other way to do it is to take a better than RAID technology. If you can afford it, there's technologies, some we call object storage. What those better than RAID technologies do is they eliminate migration issues in the future when you have to copy from disk. And the disks, if you keep them running, and of course you have to pay the electric to keep them running, if you keep them running, they can go 100 years. Because what they do is as drives fail, you replace the drives and it respreads the data. It's complicated technology to talk about here, but we could do it. Object storage respreads the data around, not on 1 drive or 2 drives, but tens, hundreds, thousands of drives. And what it does is it gives you security and safety in your data durability for 100 years. The third way, of course, is to use the cloud. And the cloud is what we call an OpEx model versus a CapEx. I mean, you don't buy the cloud, you buy access to the cloud. The advantage to that is you never have to worry about it. I mean, I use iCloud for my personal stuff, and I love it because I can grab stuff anywhere I need it. But I pay for it. Every year I write a check. I only have a little bit of iCloud, but then I have a little bit of Google Cloud as well. I have a little bit of Amazon, but you pay for it. The cloud gets expensive if your content is up there and you never use it. The cloud's not expensive if you're remonetizing that content often and you're getting money back out of it. But I love the idea of us archiving more than we ever have because I think future generations, they need to see Keeping Up with the Kardashians. That's a joke. No, but future generations need to see good content, good movies, good everything. Everything we do is important. Some of the commercials, not sure. Keeping Up with the Kardashians, sorry. But we need to maintain that content, so archive is going to be really important in the future. Okay? Thank you very much.